Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Numbers of Thoth. In this film, we will be investigating the great god Thoth. Thoth was one of the most important deities of the ancient Egyptian pantheon. He could be depicted in several ways. Anthropomorphically with the head of an ibis, as an ibis, or as a baboon, as a hare, and occasionally as a hawk. His chief shrine was at Kmonnu or Hermopolis Magna in the valley known as Upper Egypt. He is often called the Egyptian god of wisdom and the inventor of writing. Thoth is said to be the only ancient Egyptian god to survive beyond the Greco-Roman world. In the 2nd century BC, the Jewish historian Artapanus of Alexandria identified Thoth with the biblical prophet Moses and the Greek god of boundaries Hermes, claiming in an unashamed bout of ethnic and religious one-upmanship that Moses had given the people of Egypt boats, weapons, and philosophy, as well as the 36 gods of their administrative districts. This Moses, he said, was loved by the Egyptians, who treated him as a god. The 4th century AD Egyptian alchemist and Gnostic Zosimus of Panopolis likened Thoth to the biblical Adam, because he was corpora, the outer human whose soul was made of light. Centuries later, the alchemists and Renaissance luminaries John D. Robert Boyle and Sir Isaac Newton were intrigued by Thoth as Hermes Trismegistus or thrice great Hermes as he came to be known in late antiquity. So, too were the 19th and 20th century occultists Madame Helena Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, and members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a secret society devoted to the study and practice of mysteries, metaphysics, and the paranormal, founded in 1887. Ironically, the people who take the least interest in Thoth and his secrets are Egyptologists. It seems that Thoth and his secrets have no place in the logical positivism of modern Egyptology. Where to understand an ancient culture is to describe its objects and buildings and repeat the canon of orthodox anthropological thought that claims religion as a social activity, whose principal concerns are power, community cohesion and social control. To Egyptologists, Thoth has become little more than the patron saint of bureaucrats. But the Egyptians credited him as the author of all works of science, religion, philosophy, and magic. The Greeks further declared him the inventor of astronomy, astrology, the science of numbers, mathematics, geometry, and surveying. To them, Thoth was also the god of medicine, botany, theology, civilized government, the alphabet, reading, writing, and oratory. In fact, they claimed he was the true author of every work of every branch of knowledge, both human and divine. So, Thoth was the Egyptian Prometheus, the god who imparted the knowledge of the gods to their people so they could prosper. But unlike the Greek gods who guarded their knowledge jealously, the Egyptian gods wanted their creation to thrive. So, let's delve into the first of Thoth's secrets, the secrets of his name. Thoth had many names and epithets that expressed the great god's qualities and attributes. Such names are typical of polytheistic religions where a god's descriptions told of the god's essence, role, and the things over which the god was thought to have influence. Here are just a few of his epithets or handles. Lord of God's words. Counter of stars. The opener of the year. Foremost of the Westerners. Vizier of Re. The one who teaches the gods mat. The divine scribe. The Cubit of truth. The bull of the two truths, and the maker of the everlasting. Thoth was the penultimate name given to the Egyptian baboon or ibis-headed god of writing, wisdom and knowledge. It was a corruption of Tehuti, a version of the god's Egyptian name Jehuti, Dehoauti or Dewi, and was given to him by the Romans. Egyptologist E. A. Wallace Budge translated his name as he who is like the ibis. The Greeks called Thoth Hermes because he reminded them of their messenger god and because he was a god of the moon. They equated his healing powers and role as conductor of the souls of the dead with Hermes, who was the shepherd of lost souls. The god who guided the deceased to the mythical ferryman, Charon, who transported them over the river Styx to complete their journey to Hades. The Romans had their own version of Hermes called Mercury, but Mercury was not identical to Hermes or Thoth. The Romans also had their own god of wisdom, Minerva, who became closely aligned with Greek Athena. However, in many other respects, Mercury was practically identical to the Greek Hermes. He wore the same winged shoes or talaria, a feathered hat or petissos, and he carried the caduceus, a winged staff entwined with two snakes. The Romano-Egyptian god most closely related to Thoth was not Mercury but Hermanubis. Hermanubis combined the Greek Hermes with the Egyptian Anubis, the dog-headed god who led the souls of the dead to the Hall of the Two Truths, where their hearts were weighed against the feather of Mat. The Greeks and Romans did see the connection with the ibis the Egyptians saw, and they made nothing of Thoth in his guise as a baboon or a hare. To the Greeks and Romans, Thoth was principally a conductor of the souls of the dead. In the dying days of the pagan world, scholars of the Romano-Egyptian world, Thoth was given his last name, Hermes Trismegistus or thrice great Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus was the legendary Egyptian sage or succession of sages who was said to have composed the Corpus Hermetica and the Judeo-Christian Book of Enoch. So, to the Egyptians, Thoth was known as Tuti. To the Greeks, he was Hermes, and to the Romans, Thoth. To the scholars at the end of the classical world, Thoth was Hermes Trismegistus. As we said earlier, these gods were not exactly the same in every detail, but they were similar enough for the ancients to equate one with the other. If we look at the epithets we spoke of earlier, such as counter of stars and the cubit of Mat, we can get a better idea of what Thoth meant to the ancient Egyptians. As Lord of God's words in the divine scribe, Thoth was the god who gave metaphysical thoughts names. Why is this important? Well, it's because thoughts do not have mass and by definition, are not physical and do not exist in the material world. That is until the thought is given a name or words to describe it. Thoth gives everything a name, so he gives form to our thoughts and imagination. Thus, Thoth enables all human and godly communication and the transmission of information and ideas. In his role as counter of stars, the opener of the year, and the maker of the everlasting, Thoth was the god of metaphysical cosmology and the phenomena of time. The ancient Egyptians were fascinated by time and its paradoxes. Their view of time was not the same as ours. Ours is a scientific understanding of time, meaning time progresses or flows from the present or now. Time to the Egyptians meant many things. It was linear and cyclical and still or unmoving. Egyptologist Eric Hornung goes so far as to say, the Egyptians believed they could reverse or suspend time by successfully passing into the afterlife. And, so Thoth was the lord of all time. He was the master of the progression of the years and giver of the human lifespan. He was the lord of eternity and the giver of millions of years. He was a lord of the underworld where time stood still so that the dead were preserved forever. As foremost of the Westerners, Thoth was a lord of the underworld and a psychopomp, literally meaning a guide of souls. His priests provided the dead with their road maps to the afterlife in the form of the spells and prayers of the pyramid texts, the coffin texts and the books of the dead. As the bull of the two truths and the one who teaches the gods Mat, Thoth was the god of ethics or moral philosophy. Ethics seeks to resolve questions of human morality by defining concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, virtue and vice, justice and crime. These were all characteristics located in the heart, according to the ancient Egyptians. So, Thoth was responsible for all issues relating to the human heart. Indeed, it was Thoth who weighed the heart of the deceased on the scales of justice in the Hall of the Two Truths, to determine their after-death fate. In the New Kingdom, Thoth became the Vizier of Re. The word vizier comes from Arabic and was used to describe a man who stood between sovereign and subjects, representing the king in all matters to the people. The 11th century legal theorist al-Mawadi defined two types of viziers. The first was the wazir al-tanfi or the vizier of execution, meaning a person who had limited powers and served to implement the caliph's policies. Secondly, the far more powerful Wazir al-Tafwid or vizier with delegated powers. A man with authority over civil and military affairs, and who enjoyed the same powers as the caliph. Thoth is given the powers of the Wazir al-Tafwid in the myth of the heavenly cow when the sun god Re retreats to the sky and leaves the king to maintain Mat on earth with the assistance of Thoth. Finally, we come to one of Thoth's most curious titles, the Cubit of Truth. One might ask, how can a measuring stick be true? In the conventional sense, we often use the word true to mean correct or accurate. But it can also describe the genuineness, correctness, purity, or authenticity of a thing, action, or person as measured by a specific concept, for instance, a true friend. In everyday language, one can distinguish the truth from the lie as the intentional utterance of an untruth. So, what did the ancient Egyptians mean when they called Thoth the Cubit of Truth? We believe the Cubit of Truth equates to the mathematical length of the cubit rod, that is, with 28 digits, and with the concept of correctness. Why the ancient Egyptians chose the number 28 digits as the length of the sacred royal cubit is a long-running debate among the so-called alternative or fringe archaeologists. Egyptologists, on the other hand, never mention it. We believe they chose 28 because it is a perfect number. A perfect number is a positive integer equal to the sum of its proper divisors. Mathematically speaking, it is a number with very special and rare characteristics, which are said to have been discovered by the Greeks. The smallest perfect number is 6, which is the sum of 1, 2, and 3. The next perfect number is 28, the next after that is 496, and the third perfect number is 8128. So, perfect numbers are rare. As to the discovery of perfect numbers by the Greeks, this belief is now dismissed by most mathematicians. True, the Greeks were the first to provide a proof for perfect numbers, but they were not the first to use them. We know, for instance, that the sacred royal cubit, made up of 28 digits, was in use at the end of the 3rd dynasty because it was used in the design and construction of the pharaoh Djoser's step pyramid, the 6-tier, 4-sided structure that is the earliest colossal stone building in Egypt. Constructed in the 27th century BC, at Saqqara. It seems that both the cubit and the concept of mat, meaning harmony, truth and perfection, were both associated with the number 28 in ancient Egypt. This was perhaps because of its rarity as well as for its mathematical truth value. The cubit is called just or true because it was balanced and straight like the scale. Thoth's sacred numbers were metaphors that expressed the divine multiplicity of creation, including the dimensions of the sacred space and sacred time of the tomb, because the tomb was the place of metaphysical and spiritual transformation. Thoth, as the secrets of his names tells us, he was the god of metaphysical things. That is, of things not of this world, but of the world beyond human touch and understanding. Thoth was the god of immaterial things, of numbers and words, knowledge and thoughts. The Greek gods jealously guarded their secrets. Zeus tied Prometheus to a rock and appeared as an eagle to peck out his liver every day for eternity as punishment for stealing the gods' fire and giving it to men. Thoth, on the other hand, gave the secrets of the gods to men. These were the secrets of time and space, medicine, philosophy and morality. He gave them so that men may thrive in the land of the gods. This explains why the 2nd century BC, Jewish historian Artapanus of Alexandria identified Thoth with the biblical prophet Moses. Moses gave the Jewish people their laws and morality. It also goes some way to explain why Artapanus associated Moses with Egyptian knowledge and technology. It also explains why the Gnostics and mystics associated Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus, that is thrice great Hermes, with Thoth. If you would like to find out more about Thoth's secrets, such as why the ancient Egyptians identified him with the ibis, a common wading bird, the Hamadryas baboon, and the desert hare, hit the subscribe button and stay in touch. If you have enjoyed this video or found it useful, please give us a like and share this video with your friends. Until next time, thanks for watching.